Let's move on to part 2. Before we do, are there any questions about part 1? Okay. So a few years ago, we split up part 2 into 2 sections to help us, pull out information that only needed to be updated versus information that needed to be completed again each year. So part 2A is the annual revision section, which only needs to be revised each year as information changes. So this is why we call it annual revision. Part 2A contains the following information, again, that may only need to be revised from year to year. It does not have to be completed from scratch, just updated for that year as information changes. This includes the following areas that you see here, your food safety team, your school kitchen description and facility or serving area description, personnel and food safety certifications, master cleaning schedule, equipment and fixed assets and maintenance schedule if you have equipment that you use for storing food, purchasing information such as any non-domestic lists and purchasing vendors, as well as hazard communications information. If information changes during the year, such as after you've already reviewed this section, you can update it again, but it's not required. However, updating it as changes occur or periodically can help your consultant or reviewer to better understand your operation. Part 2 of the Transported Meals HACCP plan is also very similar to the commercial plan, so I'm just going to highlight a few differences here in Part 2, Part 2A and B, and we'll talk about Part 2B next. But Part 2A, the school operation description is a little bit different and has different options. In Part 2A, there are no cooling standards since the cooling of foods and saving of leftovers is not permitted for the transported meals operation. I don't know how that slide ended up in that order, but we're going to continue on with Part A. The person you indicate as the team leader or the person in charge as using food code language must have a certified food protection manager certification. Typically, this is probably only going to be your school nutrition administrator, and we'll talk about those requirements in just a bit. And I do apologize. It does sound like they are doing some landscaping work outside my window. So if you all can hear that, I want to apologize and hopefully they will wrap up shortly. So you do want to make sure that your food safety team section and certified food protection manager sections are consistent, at least in terms of the person that holds that certification. If you've indicated any alternate or innovative service locations in Part 2A, such as a classroom, kiosk, or hallway, make sure that you have TPHC written procedures to go with food served at those locations if you are using TPHC and not tracking temperatures. We'll talk more about TPHC procedures and what that entails later on in this webinar. In addition to listing any hazardous chemicals, it is important to conduct hazard communications training at least once a year with kitchen staff. This training should review the location of safety data sheets, information, and how to use it. Please do not overlook this section. It asks for the dates of training also. Substitute and temporary employees also need to be shown this information on their first day. In an operation where you're not preparing any food on site, most likely, or doing any of that, because you're receiving transported meals, you may still have chemicals that you use for, wiping down the surfaces that where food is served and other areas. So, do consider that you have those chemicals in use as well. It does take a team effort to complete Part 2A. Some of this information will most likely come from, your main office of your school nutrition program. This includes information on equipment and fixed assets, if you have any related to food service, equipment preventative maintenance, if you use any vacuum-packed TCS foods, the non-domestic products list that you have, any vendors, and other similar information. Other information will come from the school site, if that is separate from, where you kind of keep your main office for your nutrition program. And this can be provided by the manager or the person that's at that particular site. You may have other questions about the facility or building itself that you cannot answer, so reach out to your facilities or maintenance team to assist you with those questions. Fortunately, you only have to revise this section as needed. Here are a couple topics that we often receive questions about in this section. Serving locations and where they are located, lists of TCS foods that will need TPHC procedures, and lists of non-domestic foods.